People say silence is peaceful, but they've never met mine. Mine echoed like a scream, trapped in a locked room with no windows, no doors, and no one listening. It didn't feel gentle. It felt like drowning while smiling. My voice was small, like it had learned to apologize for existing. And no one noticed. No one ever asked, "Why are you so quiet?" They only said, "She's well behaved." I learned early, silence keeps you safe. Or so I thought. My name doesn't matter. What matters is the girl I used to be, the one who learned early that silence wasn't golden. It was demanded. My mother didn't like noise, or opinions, or girls who asked why. Her favorite sentence was, "Don't embarrass me." And I tried not to. I tried so hard to be invisible that I disappeared even from myself. I smiled on cue, sell straight, said nothing unless it was what she wanted to hear. I became her shadow. She didn't hit me, not with her hands. Her words were sharper, her silences louder, her looks colder. "Good girls don't talk back," she'd whisper. "Good girls don't cry in public." I didn't cry. I learned to cry in pillows, in closets, in silence. She called it discipline. I called it disappearing. By 13, I spoke like a guest in my own home. Careful, cautious, polite. "Smile," she'd say, before guests arrived. So I did, every time. When I was 15, I thought love would save me. His name was Daniel. He liked that I was quiet, said I was soft and easy to be around. I thought it meant I was special. What he meant was, I wouldn't argue, wouldn't question, wouldn't resist. We married fast. I told myself I was escaping. But really, I was carrying my mother's silence into another house, another life, a prettier prison, a quieter cage. I didn't even notice the door locking behind me. Daniel didn't yell. He didn't need to. He had a way of making me feel foolish for speaking. "Don't be dramatic," he'd say, if I cried. "Stop overthinking," if I asked for more. She liked me in dresses, with lipstick, quiet, agreeable. I became a reflection of what he wanted, until I stopped seeing myself. I thought if I was perfect enough, he'd love me better. But the better I behaved, the more invisible I felt. I wasn't a wife. I was decoration. The first time I said no, he didn't speak to me for 2 days. Just silence, like I'd broken something sacred. I remember making his favorite dinner, setting the table just right. Still, nothing. Not even a glance. I sat across from him, chewing shame. That's how he punished me, by pretending I didn't exist. And somehow, that hurt more than yelling ever could. I learned to fear silence even more than his words. Because silence became the cage. The first time I said no, he didn't speak to me for 2 days. Just silence, like I'd broken something sacred. I remember making his favorite dinner, setting the table just right. Still, nothing. Not even a glance. I sat across from him, chewing shame. That's how he punished me, by pretending I didn't exist. And somehow, that hurt more than yelling ever could. I learned to fear silence even more than his words. Because silence became the cage. When I got pregnant, I didn't tell him right away. I waited 3 days. Practiced in the mirror how to smile. How to soften the truth. When I finally told him, he just blinked. "We'll see," he muttered, then left for work. No joy, no kiss, just distance. I held my belly and whispered, "I'll love you enough for both of us." That night, I stared at the ceiling, wondering if motherhood would free me or finish erasing what little I had left of myself. I named her Grace. Because that's what I needed most. Grace to begin again. Grace to be louder than my fear. When she was born, I cried not from pain, but from the realization that I'd made something pure, something untouched by silence. For the first time in years, I felt full. But Daniel barely held her, said she cried too much, said I was too emotional. "Don't spoil her," he warned. But I had already decided I would break the pattern. My mother visited once. Grace was 4 months old. She stood in the doorway, arms crossed, looking at me like I'd failed already. "She cries too much," she said. "You're too soft." I smiled tightly and offered tea. But inside, I was boiling. For the first time, I didn't nod, I didn't apologize. I watched her flinch when I said, "She cries because she trusts me." My mother said nothing, just left early. And for once, her silence didn't hurt. Daniel started coming home later, talking less, touching more without tenderness. There was a difference. I felt it. He'd brush past me like I was his to use, not his to love. If I pulled away, he'd sulk. If I cried, he'd say, "You're just tired." I began to lock the bathroom door. Sometimes I'd sit on the floor, holding Grace, whispering lullabies I made up on the spot, songs I never had, promises I hoped I could keep. "You'll be safe," I'd whisper. The day Grace took her first step, Daniel wasn't home. He missed it. I clapped through tears, arms wide open as she stumbled into me, giggling. It was the first sound in our house that felt like light. I wanted to freeze time, to keep that moment safe. But when I told him later, he just shrugged. "She walk a million more times." I nodded, but deep down I knew. Some things only happen once, and some absences can't be forgiven. Nights grew heavier. Grace would cry, and I'd rock her alone. No help, no warm hand on my back. Just the hum of the fridge and my aching heart. I whispered stories to her, stories where girls were heard, where mothers were brave, where houses weren't full of ghosts. I wanted her to grow up in a world different than mine, one where bedtime wasn't filled with fear. I wrapped her in quilts my grandmother had sewn, and whispered, "You come from strength." One evening, I found an old photo of my mother holding me as a baby. She looked so young, so tired. I stared at her face, trying to see love in her eyes. Was she always this cold? Or did someone teach her silence, too? I sat on the kitchen floor and cried. Not just for me, but for every mother who never got to be soft. For every girl told to hush. I held Grace that night like she was a lighthouse. And maybe she was. My little light in the dark. Grace started talking early. Her favorite word was why. And I answered every time. I let her speak, even when it made others uncomfortable. At church, an old woman smiled at me and said, "She's got a strong voice." I smiled back. She was born to use it, and for the first time, I believed it. My daughter wasn't an extension of my silence. She was the sound I was never allowed to make. Every word she said felt like healing, echoing back to me. Then came the night I broke. Daniel came home, angry about nothing. Grace had spilled juice. He shouted. I stepped between them, shaking. "Don't you raise your voice at her," I said. My voice cracked, but it didn't vanish. He stared at me like I'd grown horns. "What happened to you?" he hissed. I smiled, tired, trembling, and ready. I remembered who I am. That night, I packed a bag. One for me, one for Grace, and one for the girl I used to be. We left that night. Rain fell like it knew my secret. I didn't look back, just drove. One hand on the wheel, the other holding Grace's tiny fingers. I didn't have a plan. Just a tank half full and a heart fully broken. I pulled into a rest stop at dawn. She was asleep, hand curled against her cheek. I whispered, "We're okay now," though I wasn't sure I believed it. But I had chosen her. And choosing her meant choosing myself at last. We stayed in a small town 3 hours away. A widow named May took us in, no questions asked. She had soft hands and too many cats. She said the house had been too quiet since her husband passed. I didn't tell her everything, just enough. She looked me in the eye and said, "You don't have to bleed to be broken, honey." I cried in her arms. I hadn't been held like that since I was a baby. For once, someone saw me and didn't look away. I worked nights cleaning offices, holding Grace during the day. We didn't have much, but we had peace, and in that peace, something strange happened. I heard my own thoughts again. They were quiet, unsure, but mine. I began writing them down. Letters to myself, to the girl I used to be, to the mother I never had, and to Grace, so one day, she'd know the truth. Not all of it, just enough. Enough to understand. And never repeat it. One night, Grace asked, "Why don't I have a daddy?" I froze. My hands went cold, heart racing. She was only 5. I knelt beside her and said, "Because some people don't know how to love right. But that's not your fault, and it's not mine either." She blinked, then smiled. "Okay." Just like that. Her trust broke me open. I cried after she slept, not out of sadness but out of relief. Maybe I hadn't ruined her. Maybe I'd set her free. Years passed, I got older. So did Grace. And one day, I found her sitting quietly, staring out the window. She turned to me and asked, "Did anyone ever hurt you, Mama?" I paused, looked at her face, so much of mine and hers. I took a deep breath. "Yes," I said, "but they didn't win." Her eyes didn't widen. She didn't ask who. She just came close, put her hand on mine, and whispered, "I'm glad you're here." And just like that I was. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, listening to the hum of the fridge, the soft rustle of the curtains. Grace's words echoed in my mind. "I'm glad you're here." No one had ever said that to me before, not like that. Not with such quiet certainty. I cried into my pillow, not from pain, but from something I couldn't name. Maybe it was peace. Maybe it was being seen. Or maybe it was finally believing I belonged in the world. Grace started leaving me notes, little scraps of paper on the kitchen counter. "Call me if you're lonely. Don't forget your walk. You matter." I saved everyone, folded them neatly, tucked them in a drawer beside old letters I never sent. Some days I'd sit with those notes and wonder how my daughter grew into the woman I'd always dreamed of being. I used to think my silence protected her. But maybe it was her voice that saved me. When Grace had Lily, she asked if I wanted to be in the room. I froze. The smell of antiseptic, the fluorescent lights, the weight of memory all came rushing back. But I said yes. I held her hand, breathed with her, counted with her. And when Lily arrived, I sobbed. Not for the pain but for the cycle that finally broke. No belts, no silence, just light, just love. I kissed Grace's forehead and whispered, "You did what I never could. You gave her safety." Lily grew fast, curious, fearless, loud. She asked questions I never had the courage to voice. "Grandma, were you always old?" I laughed. "No, sweet girl, I used to be invisible." She didn't understand, of course. But she tilted her head and said, "You're not invisible now." And in that moment, I felt younger than ever. Not because my wrinkles disappeared, but because someone saw me, fully, and loved me anyway. That kind of love rewrites everything. Sometimes I still hear echoes of the past. A slammed door, a certain tone, a shadow at the edge of a dream. But now, when fear knocks, I answer it with memory, not of pain, but of survival. I make tea. I hum songs Grace used to sing. I sit by the window with Lily on my lap and tell her stories, not fairy tales, but truths softened by love. And when she asks, "Did you ever cry, Grandma?" I say, "Yes, but I also healed, and I'm still healing." One evening, Lily brought me a drawing. "It's you, Grandma," she said proudly. Stick figure me stood under a sun, surrounded by hearts. No belt, no locked doors, just light. I stared at it, tears threatening. "Why all the hearts?" I asked. She shrugged. "Because you're the nicest person I know." And I thought, if that's how she sees me, then I must have done something right. Maybe breaking cycles isn't loud. Maybe it's just loving different. Sometimes I wonder what my mother would think if she saw me now. Would she still call me weak? Or would she see the strength and softness? I keep her photo in a drawer, yellowed and fading. I don't hate her. I did once. But hate is heavy, and I've carried enough. Now, I just feel sad for the girl she once was, and the woman she never had the chance to be. I broke the silence, not with rage, but with tenderness. That was always the harder choice. Grace asked me once, "Do you think we're safe now?" I looked around at Lily playing, at the quiet street, at the walls that held no secrets, and said, "I think we're safer than we've ever been, and that's enough." Safety doesn't mean no fear. It means having someone who holds your hand through it. We built this life piece by piece, scar by scar, love by love, and every breath I take now isn't survival, it's living. fully, freely, finally. Lily once asked, "Grandma, were you ever little like me?" I smiled and said, "Yes, I was, but I didn't feel little. I felt invisible." That night, after she fell asleep, curled beside me, I stayed awake watching her breathe. The rise and fall of her chest, the safety in her dreams, it was everything I'd once prayed for, and never had. And suddenly, I wasn't thinking of the pain anymore. I was thinking of everything that came after it. I was thinking of the moment I held Grace for the first time. The way she wrapped her hand around my finger, unknowingly saving me. I was thinking of the night I packed a bag with shaking hands and walked into the unknown because staying meant dying slowly. I was thinking of May, the old widow who gave me shelter with her cats and her kindness, and how she said, "Honey, some things you plant in the dark grow anyway." She was right. I did. The scars never vanished, but they softened. They stopped screaming and started whispering. "You made it." Now I am older. My hands are fragile, my steps slower. But in this house, this home, my story lives on in every laugh, every hug, every morning sun that touches Lily's face. My story is not in the silence that was forced on me, but in the voice I reclaimed, and the voices I raised after mine. Grace tells me I'm the strongest woman she knows. But the truth is, I was terrified every step of the way. I just never stopped walking. One day they'll find the letters I've hidden in the chest under my bed, letters to Grace, to Lily, to the girl I used to be. And when they read them, I hope they don't cry for me. I hope they say, "She lived, she loved, and she broke the cycle." This is not the story of a victim. It is the story of a survivor, a mother, a grandmother, a woman who walked through hell and planted flowers there.